everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Small Business Bestie. This week, I am chatting with Terri Paige, who is just a powerhouse of a woman. She's got such an interesting background, and I'm so excited to learn more about what you're up to these days and kind of the path that got you there. So, Miss Terri, if you take just a moment and tell us about yourself, and we'll get going.
Well, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. It's nice to meet you in sort of in person, I guess, right? This is in person these days, right?
Yeah.
Well, I am a wife and a mom. So I actually like to say that first, probably because I've been that for so long.
Yeah.
I always like to say I've been going steady with my husband for like 47 years, but we've been married for 43.
Wow.
And we have 8 children together and 3 grandchildren. And we've been in business together for 33 years. So
If you guys are listening, you can't see my slow blink right now, but that is incredible.
we make it work. We make it work. We grew up together. I mean, sometimes honestly, we behave like siblings together, and not a good way, that competitive thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. People ask us how long we've been married, how we've been able to stay together so long. And my husband came up a few years ago with this really insightful answer, and it was so true. He said, we just didn't give up at the same time. Is what it was. Because, of course, there are the years and the not years and the seasons of, why am I even here? So I don't know. We just didn't both give up at the same time. That's really the answer.
That's beautiful. And that's the same in business too, right? With
Oh,
business
yeah.
partners, you have the same type of like reality that sometimes one's on and one's off. As long as you're not both off at the same time, you're golden.
That is true. That is true. But my background originally is in accounting. My husband and I both went to college at UK at the University of Kentucky and graduated there. I worked as an accountant while he went on to medical school. And, I always like to say it was I told you this earlier, I'm a recovering accountant. I think it was a wonderful skill set to have, a degree from UK in accounting and that business background. And I worked in corporate accounting and did a little stint as an internal auditor, which was painful given my personality because unfortunately you're sitting in a room locked in there ticking and tying and nobody likes auditors. So,
Right.
I couldn't talk to anybody, but good preparation. We moved to Louisville and my husband did his residency here. And then we always knew we were going to hang a shingle, go out somewhere into a community in Kentucky, probably. We didn't really quite know where. We both grew up in rural Western Kentucky and, we knew we didn't necessarily want to go back there because it wasn't close enough to a big city, but we wanted that kind of country feel, but closer. So we settled out in Oldham County and hung that shingle in 1992 and started that business from scratch. He did the doctoring and I did the business side. And for a while, it was just the two of us and a nurse. And it was so simple back then. I could do the insurance billing at night.
Wow.
On my own, on the old
Yeah.
dot matrix printer,
Uh-huh.
Of course,
Uh-huh.
now I wouldn't even touch that, nor do I ever touch taxes. But it was just simpler back then, and we grew that, and I've always had a passion personally for health and wellness, and, when I was a teenager, actually even younger than a teenager, I was into fitness and nutrition and learning the next thing, and that just has carried through my whole life as a thread. So I loved being part of, it was a primary care practice that we originally started back then and loved being part of that health journey for our patients. Later on, I actually dabbled for a little while thinking I was going to buy a fitness center. Glad I didn't do that because as I was evaluating that, the YMCA announced they were going to build one in our community. So it
Oh,
wouldn't have been a good one. I don't think it would have lasted very long. It was a little boutique fitness center that was great. It was the only game in town. And while I was evaluating it, the YMCA came in and said, we're going to come out to Oldham County. And I actually ended up just being on the planning committee for that.
oh. Well, at least you still got to have your hands in it, right?
Yeah.
So really quickly, because I'm not from Kentucky originally and I'm still trying to figure it all out, what's one of the towns in Oldham County that I may have heard of?
LaGrange, Crestwood, Paper
Okay.
Valley, just
Okay.
kind of on that east end of Louisville, in between Louisville and Cincinnati, going up I.
Okay. Thanks for that geography lesson.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just a little bedroom community. So a bedroom community to Louisville, which made it perfect for us as we were doing our evaluation because, close enough in, 20 minutes into downtown Louisville, but still, especially back then, we actually bought a farm. We bought a 50-acre farm, and there were many farms along that corridor when we purchased it in back in 92. But by the time we sold it in 2018, I mean, actually, it was the only farm on that road.
Oh, wow.
So, and we enjoyed it. We had a great time there. Had all 8 kids of ours there. 2 of ours weren't born in that spot, but 6 of them were. And so we sold it. My husband and I were ready to do that. Kids mourned it a lot, but we were just kind of ready to move on and not have that much of a maintenance. So we moved. I always say we moved into town. So then we moved back into Jefferson County, and that's where our business is now.
I see. So tell us about the business today. You said you started with primary care. How has that changed over the years, and what are you guys focused on now?
Primary care, especially back then, was a little slower paced in terms of the interactions with the patient. You were really able to build that relationship and that rapport. I mean, it was private practice, right? So it wasn't part of a large system. A lot of the metrics that are in place today, they weren't there back then, which actually, in my opinion, was good.
Right.
Was good. It allowed for relationship building, hand holding, understanding the family, that type of thing. Now it's very metric driven and code oriented. There's a process, and check these an algorithm, more of an
Mhm.
algorithm today.
Right.
Which, in some cases, of course, algorithms build efficiency, and that's wonderful. But, it just over the years, it seems as though the humanity might have, taken a little bit of a back seat to a lot of corporate medicine. So
Right.
over the years, we did build that practice. We built a building, brought in partners, ended up selling that one to the partners in 2003, and moved up into the LaGrange area and built another one. And I was out of the business for a while. We had 6 kids actually in 7 years, from 99 until 2006. We had that other set. So we were really super young when we had our first one. Actually, he went to college with us. We were
Uh-huh.
really young when we had our first one. And then the second one, and she'll tell you this. I mean, she tells everybody she was the only one that was planned. Second
Mhm.
only when it was planned. But anyway, she was. We had her actually last year of med school. We thought that was a great, brilliant plan. Little did we realize what we were going into in residency, and I would basically just become a single mom during residency and work.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, it was fine. It was okay. We made it. Those were hard years, by the way, just so you know. Those were some of those years where one of us was giving up.
Mhm.
But anyway, we just felt like, we had a kind of an awakening. I guess we got a little bit older, and I realized, gosh, I always wanted a big family. We've just been going and going and going for so long that, once you slow down a little bit and you start to think and reflect, we just actually opened ourselves up to however many God wanted to send us. And he sent us 6 and 7 years. And I was 35 when we had the first one. so
Oh my
so
gosh.
that was a little hiatus from the business for me. But during
Yeah.
that time, actually, some brewing health conditions that I'd really had my whole life, but had just managed to work around, particularly like GI issues and some autoimmune conditions and things like that. That they really hit the fan in about 2008 for me.
Mm.
With that, we started to look for answers. But at that point, I literally had a pill for everything. I mean, I had a pill for my GI problems, my allergies, my depression, my fibromyalgia, my chronic fatigue. I mean, I had all those diagnoses, and I literally had a med for everything. And, the overarching answer was I was just depressed. Right. That was the
Mhm.
overarching answer. And it did kind of hit a fan. And there was a watershed moment in our home where I challenged my husband, because he had kind of fallen into that pattern of, here's a symptom, here's a diagnosis, here's a medication.
Right.
And, just that algorithm, right? That thought process that there's, rather than going upstream and trying to figure out really what's the root cause, what's the reason, and how can we get the body to heal itself? Because really, our bodies can heal themselves if they're given the right prompts and the right tools.
Right.
So we started to go down a path personally as a family to figure out basically how mom could come back alive, basically. Because
Yeah.
I was like 60, 70 pounds overweight, just really struggling with health issues. And I was, mid 40s. I think I was 44 when it all kind of hit the fan, maybe somewhere around there. And that led us personally as a family down a path to look at things like gut health and to look like, gut permeability and nutritional deficiencies and some genetic information and just a lot of different things that we started to just do at home. And once I started to feel better and come back alive, I'm always looking for a project, right? I'm always looking for a project. Once I started to feel better, had more energy, my kids were getting a little older, I was ready. Okay, let's take something on. And we really felt like, what we had learned along the way could be really helpful to our patients in primary care. So ostensibly in 2011, January, I went back to work for a year. Now I was homeschooling too. Just keep that in mind. I was homeschooling during that time. It was good. It was good. But our oldest son was in a position where he could help us with some of that for that year. So I was going to go to work for a year, 2011, calendar year, and put systems in place and create a model in that primary care center that was more focused on being proactive and improving performance and function. And if somebody was really struggling, trying to find that root cause of what was going on. And back then, that was a novel idea, and part of our goal in doing that was to ultimately make it standard of care. And I can tell you, you know, 14 years later, it truly is, finding the light of day, which is
Right.
but, so we did that. My husband went and got some more fellowships and certifications and some training. I did some certifications, started to go down a path of really digging in and learning more on the biology side and how to help people in nutrition and coaching. I became a certified coach, in the lifestyle space. And we were off to the races. I mean, it was a wonderful time. Fortunately, it didn't just last a year.
Really? Your plan didn't work?
Fortunately, unfortunately, no, it didn't last a year. Well, there were a lot of market forces that were happening. Again, we thought we were just going to do this in insurance-based primary care. Okay. And there were a lot of barriers to that. What we found was that it really, a primary care visit's usually what, like 10 minutes, maybe,
Mhm.
and it needs to be because of that structure now. Healthcare reform had come in 2008 and that had shifted. There were a lot of good things about that, but also a lot of things that I really think that was the beginning of the shift into what we have today, which is more, again, like I said, metric driven and not always in a good way. The advent of electronic health records, there were so many other things that created more red tape in the primary care practice. So, overhead was going up. We were having to, like, make sure these codes are down to the nth degree so that we can bill, so we can collect. Because if it's not, this specific code, ICD-10 codes, right? That,
Mhm.
6 months for our payment instead of 3 months.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of other mitigating factors happening in that world. Not all patients were into it. They just wanted a pill for something. So what we ultimately did is in 2013 opened up what we have today, Medical Transformation Center, as an offshoot of that primary care, but we still kept them running. So a day a week, my husband would work as Medical Transformation Center, and then the other 4 days a week he would work in primary care. And we had other physicians, nurse practitioners. It was a very large primary practice, care practice up in LaGrange. There were like 10,000 patients. It was huge.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I was still there managing those, running those. But after about a year, he realized, I can't one day a week tell people what I really believe. And the other 4 days a week, tell them, here's a pill.
Right.
Here's a pill. So ultimately we made the decision, sold the primary care practice. And he had some time that he needed to give to the entity that we sold it to. And we just ran a very limited schedule in Medical Transformation Center from about 2016 until 2017. And then in 2017, we just went full throttle into the business that we have today.
That's
So,
incredible.
I mean, basically what we do is we help people that either want to just be at their peak. Maybe there's not much going on, they're not struggling with health conditions, but they really want to, maybe they're watching their parents age not so gracefully and they, want to understand their genetics and their nutrient absorption and how they could just perform their best, whether that's just at home, whether it's in the sports arena, whether it's in the boardroom, wherever it is that they have peak performance. And then other folks who've struggled and been everywhere and not found answers that truly help them be well as opposed to just managing.
Yeah. So the practice that you have now, is your husband the only provider, or do you have other physicians and providers in the office?
We have 2 physicians. We have 2 physicians, my husband, and then we added a physician last year. And interestingly enough, and this is common knowledge, she shares the story, so I'm not talking out of school here, but she actually was a patient of ours when she was in college many years ago, and had been she was one who had been everywhere and had a little handful of meds for all the different symptoms. But, we thankfully were able to help her find that root cause, which were gut issues. They were gut
Yeah.
issues, and it was manifesting as skin and mood and all other kinds of things, energy. And she remembered that, and she later went on to medical school and wanted to be in this space. So she actually reached out to us a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, I'm finishing up my residency. Can I just come and shadow?" And we thought, "Sure, come and shadow." And we love her. She loved to be wanted to be part of this again. So we're really very excited because ultimately, and we go around now and we teach other practitioners all around the country, and have done even a little bit of international on the principles of what we call cellular medicine. And that basic concept is, our goal is to make your cells as efficient as they can be, from an immune, metabolism, and a microbiome standpoint. Because if all of that is running well, then you're running well. And
Yeah.
so, it's just part of our mission to make this ultimately standard of care so that it's out there and just part of the lexicon.
That's amazing. I have just enough knowledge about the things that you're talking about to make me sound really dumb. So I'm going to ask some stupid questions now.
Yeah. It's like an onion. We're all learning here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I think that the way that our society is kind of set up, it's like you're supposed to take responsibility for your own health and wellness, right? Like this is your own responsibility. But also, medicine is difficult and scary and complex. So just trust the experts, but also make your own choices. And so I think that there's a strange dichotomy there of like, how do you stay informed enough? Because it is complex and ever changing and all of those things. So how do you stay informed enough, but also still have faith in your providers, right? And like, where is that line? It's such a strange concept to me.
It is really hard. No, I always, there's a lot of information. I mean, I've been doing, for example, a class for years for our patients. I mean, I do 4 classes a month on gut health and the backstory on how that impacts your whole health and the connectedness of that, and then how to nourish yourself in a better way so that you can have your best health. Um, and things that we have been saying that were wah 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 wah. I mean, kind of like, really? Are you sure? Well, now all that's kind of coming out, things like, I don't know, GMOs. I mean, many, many years ago, we were trying to tell people, you don't want to eat those. Glyphosate, when it goes in, those are sprayed all the time. That's why they're genetically modified. When they get sprayed, glyphosate's on it. You eat glyphosate, it wrecks your microbiome. Don't eat it. If
Yeah,
it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be able to. So, you do want to do your research and understand and read, make sure your sources, because too, I mean, that's kind of the other thing is like so many studies are funded with an agenda. That's a tough spot too. I mean, remember the food pyramid? Do you remember the
right. Yeah,
food pyramid? Eat this much grain, eat this much fat. Don't eat fat. Fat makes you fat. Eat all these pretzels, all this bread, all that. Well, I mean, again, we've been educating people for a long, long time. You don't want to do that because, and we would have the graphs to show what happened over time. 1980 was when that food pyramid came out.
hmm,
I mean, it was funded by the grain industry.
right.
So, I mean, based on the evidence now, when you look at from 1980 forward, consumption of grain and carbs, autoimmune disease, diabetes, obesity. I mean, it's compelling when you lay those graphs on top of each other. Now,
Right.
is it correlation, causation? I don't know. You tell me. Correlation, is it causation? But I mean, it really does stem. I mean, we do know this, and this is evidence backed and based. A lot of the things that are coming out now, and that's the other nice thing is that, the curve used to be kind of like this, information coming out and it being adopted. Now, thankfully, and I really do think a lot of it is the post COVID world. Like you just said earlier, we're all waking up and going, we got to take responsibility too for ourselves. Let
Right.
me learn, let me digest, let me read this. Now it's like all of a sudden that curve, it's had a spike on knowledge and information out there, which is exciting.
Yeah. The number of medical practices who are adopting a model that sounds a lot more similar to what you all do is so inspiring because I've had experiences personally. I'm sure everyone has where, you've got something going on and there's just no answers, no answers. And having a provider who will actually sit down with you and take in, okay, let's spend an hour to find out what's really going on. Tell me about the family history. Tell me about your lifestyle. Tell me about your stress levels. Tell me about your work, all of that. And then to say, I think there's a couple of tests that we could run to see, like, is there something else happening here that maybe, and so like a lot of other people get a little blood test, find out that there's like a genetic mutation. Oh, you have no vitamin B in your system,
Right, right.
Okay. So you have no energy, great. But yeah, I think that like that the time value that providers are able to give to their patients in a setting like that is so important because you do get that backstory and it's like you can actually put the puzzle together instead of just like looking at where's the hole in the picture and trying to like randomly fill it with some pill, to actually get a full idea of the picture and then say, okay, well, logically, it makes sense that this could be happening.
Right, right. I mean, it's exciting. I mean, anytime I used to do all of the intake calls when we first started. I mean, it was a Google Voice number. It would come to my cell phone. I would answer it wherever I was.
Mhm.
And that actually was one of my favorite things about our whole business is hearing that story at the front end, right? Hearing that story of, and so oftentimes it was just like this resignation and hopelessness of, I have been everywhere. Nobody has heard me. And it could just be something as simple. I say simple because there are a whole lot more complex things, but as I'm going through menopause, right? And I feel awful and I can't think and I don't know what's wrong with my brain and, all those things. And my doctor's just telling me, "Oh, well, it's normal, natural. You'll just get through it."
Yeah.
No. I mean, it is normal, actually, I guess, yes, but
Right.
we have tools, right? But being able to connect with that person and just say, "You know what? I hear you, and you are not the first person that I've heard this story from, and we've got this. We've got this."
Yeah.
And, and then over time to see that transformation of what happens with them and the impact, not only that it makes for typically that individual, but also their whole support network. Because especially like, for a mom, right? For example, if a mom's really struggling and you're able to help mom, well, what are those lifestyle choices, that information, that knowledge? That's going to then permeate down to any, children, grandchildren, her mom, dad, whatever, all these extended relatives, they're going to see that change. And I mean, and if she controls the food sourcing and things like that for the family, obviously that's going to be a huge impact for
Right.
generations. And that's good work. That's exciting.
That is really exciting. So are you still functioning as kind of like you're the CEO of the company? Is that correct? Is that your position?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me about like the team that you have in place in the business. I'm always interested to find out more about like leadership styles and things like that.
Yeah. Well, we are in an evolution. It's kind of fun. We've always, like I said, my goodness, I think 33 years now qualifies me as always been an entrepreneur. The stint I did over in corporate accounting. I mean, it's business ownership, right? The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat.
Absolutely.
It's like, whoa, okay, I'm hanging on and I'm scared to death, but I'm going to jump. But, with this particular practice, we started out very small. Like I said earlier, it was an offshoot. I mean, we had the whole structure in place of the large primary care when we first incorporated a medical
Hmm.
transformation center. But then when we sold off, then our little skeleton crew there were just three of us. There was me and my husband, and we had a medical assistant at the time. And we functioned like that. We had, a small patient base. We were just building. And we actually spent 2014 as a PR blitz and then kind of had to pull back a little just because of capacity at that point with
Yeah.
that we had made. So we really didn't start in earnest until 2017, I would say, to fill up a full book of business, so to speak. And at that point, there were three of us total. Then there were four. And when you're running a small business, especially as a startup, it's all hands on deck, right? Everybody can do everything. Nobody's really just, this is my lane. This is what I'm responsible for. It's
Right.
here, I've got that one. Oh, let me take care of that. Let me take care of that. Well, that's all fine and good in the beginning, right? And that's the way you have to run, right? You have to be
Right.
a jack of all trades. We were actually poised for some growth. 19 had reached out. We were hiring a nurse practitioner at the time. We were going to hire her, and we had started to add to our team, base. We'd added another clinical person to help support the new nurse practitioner coming on. We finally hired somebody full time to answer phones and really be a good presence. So we were building out a team and starting to look at permanent space. We were in timeshare, which was great. Timeshare is a wonderful thing when you're growing a business because
Mhm.
you don't have all that, fixed costs and assets to worry to pay for. But, we had a little thing in the beginning of 2020, right?
Uh-huh.
A little business disruption in the thing of during 2020, and we were in a tiny little space, like 600 square feet. So we couldn't really distance, we couldn't, be compliant with all that. So we actually all went home in March of 2020 with our plan of how we were going to head off. And I just hired like two people. So they were
Oh
remote
gosh.
trying to train. But again, it was just very all hands on deck. And, we're all working together. And we actually, we did pretty darn good for a year. We worked remotely for a year. We had a system, we had a voice over internet phone, we had a handoff procedure. We would have a morning huddle and an afternoon huddle via Zoom. This grew actually during that year. So
Wow.
and I think it was because, well, I mean, I know it was because, again, what we talked about earlier, people realized, gosh, I want to be proactive here, get myself as fit as can be and healthy as can be so that I can have a stronger immune system and be ready to withstand whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And so we did, we grew, and then we came out of our homes in the beginning of 2021. At that point, we had decided to build and to start our expansion.
Okay.
We had not brought on the nurse practitioner. We just paused her and then brought her on that following year. We moved in from 600 square feet to like 4,500 square feet. I mean, we were like,
Oh my.
added, added team members, added a full-time RN to start to build out, because then at that point we were more than consultation meaning, just conversation like this, right here, go get your labs, go get your tests, here's what you need to go do, go get, etc. I mean, that was our business model. It was just consultation, but we knew when we built a physical space, we wanted to add supporting services like stem cell therapy, like IV infusion, like some regenerative procedures. So, a lot of different things that we had in our plan to do. We just had to pause
Right.
a year. Well, when we moved in here in our new space with more team members, and, that's actually where we experienced some tough growing pains in terms of management structure, business model, that type of thing.
Mhm.
No longer did all hands on deck work, but we really, struggled to find our footing on, okay, who's accountable for what? How do we create some structure without stifling the team spirit?
Yes.
And it was painful. I mean, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. I don't know if you experienced this, but fighting your own nature sometimes is tough. And
Absolutely.
realizing, I tend to be a people pleaser and oh, don't worry about that. I'll do that. Or, oh, I don't want to bother you, but
Yes.
and that makes creating a nice, accountable, not punitive, but just accountable structure, so that we
Right.
can all function and take the best care of our patients, and, there not be confusion. So it's been a painful journey. I will tell you, again, we're always a work in progress. Okay. Right.
Right.
But we have thankfully come out that other side now. And we've developed a leadership team, which has been fantastic. So now it's not, oh, go ask Terri, go ask Terri, go ask Terri, because, I created that, right?
Right.
Okay, I've got to decide everything. And, and buck stops with me. And, all of that. I had created that, I think, for too long. It was appropriate in the beginning as a startup,
Right.
but not as appropriate. We probably went maybe a couple of years too long with it,
Yes.
truthfully.
Yes.
And we're now actually we've embarked on a journey to implement EOS. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I read that darn book in 2020. I read Traction in 2020 and thought, what a great idea. I can do this.
Huh?
Finally, now we are working with an implementer and
Oh,
super excited. Yeah, we
congratulations.
started a couple months ago, and we're getting our footing on it. But we're all. I mean, our leadership team. It's so exciting to have now more structure because my nature is not structure,
Yeah.
but other people on our team do have that, and so just learning how to communicate within those confines, and that's your lane. You go do it, and just I don't know, tell me what to do. I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm such a huge fan of EOS. Think that the the biggest drawback to EOS is that it really is laid out for like a larger team. You do need to have that leadership team capability. And so if you're a solopreneur or two or three people, it gets really hard. But I still think that the principles in EOS are so important to grapple with and understand even from the beginning. Because if you can imagine, like if you had read that book back in 2013, and started the practice with some of those principles of
That's
not letting you be
right.
the book or the buck stops here, but instead there's some sort of a guide or a system or a process that you're following. So, congratulations. Do you feel comfortable telling us who your implementer is? Because I know I want people to be aware of who their resources are in the local area. The only implementer that I know right now personally is John Fox from here in Lexington, but I know that they're all over.
Yeah, so Jack Martin is our implementer. And actually the way it happened, I don't know if you what you think about this, but I just think sometimes we get what we need when we need it, right? And I was at a spot where we and I have worked with I have worked with a coach for 11 years and she is phenomenal. And she has helped me personally through a lot of growth and our business. She's out in California. She was actually a coach before there were coaches, which I think is amazing. Like she's one of the
Mhm.
original. She knew Stephen Covey. You know,
She's the OG.
she's the OG. And so many of the things that she was coaching us to do here as a team, we had done a lot of it, but we were having, and I do know just from a responsibility standpoint, I think a lot of that had to do with me and just some of my issues. We were having trouble creating a scorecard
Right.
and accountability structure and so forth, and we've been grappling with that for a few years, and I had looked at some different systems. Oh, maybe this could help us, maybe that could help us, whatever, and we had moved towards a leadership team, but again hadn't really handed
Yeah.
like fully. It's like still, oh, it's okay, I got it,
Right.
I can do it. And I'm part of a group at the University of Louisville called the Small Business. I'm on a CEO roundtable with the Small Business Center at U of L. And we get together every month and somebody sponsors a speaker. And a few, maybe 3 months ago, somebody had brought in their EOS implementer, Jack, and he had just given a little presentation and talked about it. And, I'd been revisiting my book. I had been reading it anyway. And I just thought, okay, I think I'm just going to take the next right step, which is schedule a
Yes.
coffee with Jack, talk to him for a minute and just see if this is a good fit. And, then once we did that, I had the coffee with Jack. Then we did that discovery day with the leadership team. And, and I just said, what do you guys think? What do you want to do? And they were like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was thrilling to me because, sometimes I might be the visionary. I might come up with like a few ideas over here that might be left
Uh-huh.
field. And I was like, oh gosh, I wonder if they're going to think it's one of those. Oh my gosh, there's another idea,
Terry had a dream.
What an idea over there. Yeah, no, we don't have time for that. So I've been very thankful that our team has embraced it. And, we're muddling through our level 10 meetings right now, trying to get them right. And,
Yeah, I love that for you guys. So I'm just going to give a little backstory in case anybody hasn't heard me rant and rave about how much I love EOS. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it is a system that was created by Gino Wickman. He wrote a book about it called Traction that kind of gives you the high level overview of what this system is and how it can help your business. There's a whole library of books that go along with Traction to help you dig deeper. And they have a team of implementers all across the country or the world, actually, that you can hire an implementer to come in and kind of guide your team through the process of getting the EOS implemented into your business. And then once you get that implemented, sometimes it takes a few months, sometimes it takes a year or two. But once you've gotten it implemented, then you just kind of work together with your team, with your leadership team within your organization to continue carrying out those principles and gain traction for your business to help you grow, scale, meet your goals, all of those things. So that's our TED Talk today on
Yeah.
EOS.
I loved about it was that, and Jack was real clear about this. He goes, "My goal is that you graduate.
Absolutely.
I don't want you to become dependent on me forever." He said, "The reason I have some capacity right now is because I've had some people graduate, which is
Right.
exciting." And, I looked around and I thought, been watching some other businesses here locally that I have admired and known about and watched them just flourish and grow. Some of them have sold their businesses, somebody retired, but they, just watching what has happened to their businesses, as I've been paying attention in the last 10, 15 years,
Right.
especially, that was really the reference point. Those were the reference points for me. But what's interesting, I think, about EOS is that honestly, I had read most of the backstory, right? And Gino will say this. He didn't invent EOS. He just consolidated so many of the masters, right? Steve
Right.
Covey, Patrick Lencioni, Jim Collins. He just consolidated all of it into a structured system,
Absolutely.
like that somebody could say, "Here, do this." And that's where I feel like we were flailing, is creating that structured system.
Absolutely. I love that. I had no idea that you were an EOS follower, and that is so exciting. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I do think it's one of the best tools out there for entrepreneurs. And like you said, there's a ton. There's probably a million different ways that you could look at how to improve your business. But I do really appreciate that EOS brings it all in and it says, okay, for systems, here's how you do it. For leadership, here's how you do it. For meeting pulse, here's how you do it. And it kind of brings everything together into one little package for you. So it's not so overwhelming and you're not having to like cherry pick things from reading all the books.
Well, and I think that's it. I literally have read so many books over the course of, the last, especially 15 years. And one of the things that we have done early on is, and there are all kinds of tools to do this, but they're basically the profiling tools. And the one we did was emergenetics. And what I know about myself, and that's kind of freeing too when you do some of those tools, don't you think? Because you learn some things about yourself that maybe you have always fought, within
Mhm.
yourself and just thought, "Oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be like, and not struggle like this with whatever?" And it's kind of empowering once you realize this is how I'm wired. And that's okay. I just need to go hang out with somebody that's wired the opposite so that we can get stuff done.
Absolutely.
So I
Absolutely.
am very, relational, big picture. I've got analytical and so think of a pie. Okay. So my relational I think it's like, I don't know, 60, 70%. My conceptual is maybe 20%. My analytical, is a good chunk of the rest of that. And my structural is like almost non-existent. And it makes so much sense. I love options. And so reading all those books, there were so many great ideas. I personally was having trouble distilling it down, making the choices and getting it done. So
Absolutely.
that's what I have appreciated personally about EOS and the team
Oh,
members that I have on, together with us now that have a lot of that structure. They're breathing a sigh of relief. It's like, thank goodness.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I should have known as soon as we got on the call that you were a visionary because your jacket just screams like creativity and like so
Right.
I love it so much.
Don't tell my PR people or because typically I'll be in trouble for this jacket. Okay. I'm just
Uh-oh.
gonna tell you, normally I am supposed to, if I know I'm good, if I'm supposed to be on camera or photographed, I am supposed to be wearing a color. But man, I just wasn't feeling it today. We had big storms. I wanted to wear my black.
Yeah, you look amazing.
I like black and white. It's simple.
It is. It's classy, but
At
you've got
any
the
given moment would be totally.
Man, Terry, I've had so much fun talking with you. Before we go, is there anything else that you want to chat about? Any words of wisdom, anything like that that you want to leave our listeners with today?
Well, honestly, probably just a little health advice.
Yeah.
because it's so impactful. I didn't mention this earlier, but it was actually what built the the revenue for my husband to get trained like we talked about earlier in kind of the mid like 2012, 13, 14, 15 when he was doing all that training. Somebody had paid for that. This is like my story in life, right? Somebody
Uh-huh.
had paid for his education.
Uh-huh.
But I actually grew a really large business in with a health and wellness company, with a network marketing health and wellness company. And unfortunately I don't work that as much as I used to, but I still use all the products, and the principles are so sound and they are part of our ecosystem here at MTC. But I used to go out and do wellness workshops, and I would tell people, especially back in those earlier days of Medical Transformation Center, I would say, my day job is, starting a medical practice, a startup, and we're doing, regenerative and functional medicine and really helping people get healthy. But I'm just going to tell you that if you do these things that I'm telling you tonight in your living room, you may never even have to come and see us.
Are you going to tell us the things?
Okay. Medical transform, it's like MTC Light. Well, there's so much that's connected to your gut health. Okay. I mean, seriously, like autoimmune disease, hormone issues, brain fog, foggy thinking, focus, ADD, ADHD. There's so many pieces that are connected. They're all interconnected. And this is data backed on the science side and Medical Transformation Center. But I'm just telling you that if you pull out as much as you can the artificial sweeteners, so things like NutraSweet, aspartame, sucralose, all of those things that aren't really a plant. I mean, stevia is fine. It's a plant. Eat it. Monk fruit, fine. Eat it. If you don't want the sugar, right? Pull out all that artificial junk because it's wreaking havoc on your insulin levels. It's such a cruel joke, right? I mean, when you eat that 0-calorie Coke, it makes your insulin levels spike.
Mm.
Yeah, right. I mean, it shouldn't. There weren't any calories in it, but it does because that's what that chemical will do in your system. So it messes with your gut. It destroys your microbiome, artificial sweeteners, artificial preservatives, BHT, BHA. And you're never going to get this perfect. So don't make yourself nuts that it's either all or none, but do the best you can. Start pulling some of that artificial junk out of your diet and eating clean whole foods, clean being non-GMO, organic, as much as you can, antibiotic, steroid, hormone free animal products, because all of that disrupts your hormone system, has a huge impact on fertility or just function, early menopause, early puberty. There's so many pieces to this focus and ability to think clearly. I mean, so many of our kids, and again, we were an internal medicine and pediatrics practice. So we did a lot in the early days, but so many kids maybe that are medicated that don't need to be if we clean up their diet and get their gut more in integrity so that their little brains can, so they're, because your neurotransmitters are made in your gut, the
Right.
stuff that create, your ability to focus, your mood, that manages anxiety, depression. And that's not to say there aren't situations, of course, that we need counseling on and help and coping mechanisms, but get your body as intact as you can so that you've got a fighting chance to be
Right.
resilient. So that's what I would tell you. I mean, I'm 61 and a half years old. I'm almost 62. I feel better today than I did in my 20s, in my 30s, and into my early 40s before we started to make these transitions. And it just gets better from there. So just that's something that you can control. You don't have to pay anybody else, any money for anything. Just start shopping differently and reading labels.
Such great advice. I had a conversation with my background is also in health and wellness. I was a massage therapist for a long, long time, and I was training specifically for oncology massage.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to help these people. And I was at a workshop, and the teacher was this beautiful old hippie lady. And she said, if somebody is in cancer treatment actively, if they call you and say, will you bring me a Big Mac on your way to the appointment today? She said, you stop and get them that Big Mac. And I was like, no way, no how. I would never bring anybody anything from McDonald's. That's not going to happen. And so we had this huge, long conversation about food and all of these things. And she said, Michelle, the amount of pressure that you're putting on yourself to be absolutely perfect with your diet is probably causing more dis-ease in your body than the good that you're doing. Because I was so wrapped up in never ever touch fast food, no sodas, no sugars, no, all of these things. And she said, you're taking it like to the extreme the other way. And so I think it's so important for us to realize the way we think about our food,
Yeah.
the way we think about our bodies also has an effect. Do the best you can do. Like you were saying, you're never going to be perfect,
Not gonna be. You're gonna want to go out to eat,
but do the best you can do,
do the best you can do. Yeah, do the
which is
best.
probably a lot better than most of us are doing,
Oh yeah.
honestly.
Yeah,
So
it's always it is. It's a work in progress, but just, find something, switch out your I mean, honestly, I tell people even if you drink a regular cane sugar, non-GMO cane sugar soda as opposed to a diet soda that's
yeah,
made with NutraSweet or sucralose, I mean, that's a good switch. I'd always rather eat pure non-GMO cane sugar, right?
right.
Than eat sucralose.
Mm.
So, anyway, that's what I would say. Just, it'll impact you. It will impact the folks around you. Just start to become aware of what you're putting in your mouth. And you're right, though, Michelle. Because we see people here that will be like, I can only eat 3 things. Everything else bothers me. That's the extreme. I'm not saying that.
Right.
Don't go down that path. But just start to make those little changes to clean up and see what you notice.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so tell us where we can find you on the internet and socials and all of that if anybody wants to follow along on your journey.
On social, well, medicaltransformationcenter.com is our business. And then terri.paige is Instagram and Facebook. And I don't know, I think maybe there might be a picture of me and a bunch of kids on my profile picture, but that's okay. That is a lot of fun. That was a fun season. It was exhausting, but our youngest now is almost 19. So yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing. Terri, it's been so fun to talk with you. I'll make sure to link out to the website and your social medias and all of that in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in following along, please check out the description or the show notes to be able to link out and see more from Terri and her team at the Medical Transformation Center. And I appreciate it so much. This has been a lot of fun, Terri.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk with you guys later. All right, besties. That does it for today. If you're interested in becoming a part of the Small Business Bestie community, join us in the Facebook group or find out more information on the website at smallbusinessbestie.org. Please share the podcast with your friends who could use a friend in business. And it would really mean so much to me if you follow the show and take just a few seconds to rate or review. A 5-star rating really helps the show become visible to other besties who may just need the support and friendship that we offer.